Well, many people around the world with family in the Philippines have been voicing their worry as the communication blackout continues and they wait for contact. Just what we were discussing there with Martin. Well, Lucas de Jong joins us now to talk to a few people who've been gathering their stories. Lucas, over to you.
Well, John, millions of people have been affected within the Philippines, but millions more with family outside the Philippines are sitting, waiting and watching for exactly what is going on inside the country. Two people I'd like to introduce to you now are ones that have been gathering their stories here in the BBC and talking to those people. Samantha Barry, our social media producer, and Amber Dawson from the user-generated content team here at the BBC. Amber, let's talk to you first. You've been speaking to people throughout the week. How are they getting in touch with their family on the ground?
Very difficult, and with great difficulty is the short answer to that. Power lines are down, electricity is down, the internet's down, phone connections aren't working. I spoke to one gentleman called Bob King, and it took an international effort on behalf of his family to get any news at all. His wife is from the Philippines, from a small village on an island close to Tacloban. It took a cousin Chad, to fly from the United States to Manila and then on to Tacloban, and to walk 110 kilometres from Tacloban to this village called Sulangan on Samar Island. It took him over 2 days to get there. Finally, this morning, Bob had a very short message from him saying he'd arrived, he was safe, and amazingly the rest of the family was safe too. There was nothing left of any of the buildings, but everybody was alive, and now that family has been evacuated.
That's a lovely story that family has survived, but a lot of families have had no news back at all, haven't they? You've been talking to some of them as well?
Yes, and it's a desperate situation. There are people throughout the world who have family who are living in these islands, very remote places, and they have no means at all to communicate, to try and find out if their loved ones are alive or dead. I've been speaking to a gentleman called Andrew Hayes. He's been desperately trying to get news of his wife, Lanakar. She is in Tacloban. She was there for the anniversary of her father's death to be there with her family. He was speaking to her on Thursday on the internet at the point when the typhoon hit and was talking to her as all the power went. And since then, he's heard nothing. Anything he's tried has led to nothing. Relatives he's contacted in the Philippines themselves, because there's no power, no way of communication with these areas, they can tell him nothing. He is now doing what I think many people in his situation are doing, which is wrestling with the idea of, should I get on a plane and go out there and try and find my wife myself? If I do that, though, am I just adding to the burden of aid that's needed there, because I then become another mouth to feed? It's a very difficult dilemma for people.
Samantha, we've been talking to you throughout the week about people on the ground in the Philippines and around the area. How have their moods changed over the week as the stories continued?
They've become more desperate. We've been getting lots of messages, like the user-generated content team, from people messaging us on Facebook, coming to our Facebook page, posting desperate appeals, looking for their brothers and sisters and mothers and families in the area. One example of that, somebody I've been talking to over the last few days, is Wilma. She's a young Filipino worker in Bahrain, and she has, for the last few days, been desperately seeking any information about her sister Wendy and her brother Wilmer and their nieces. So she's been messaging. I've been talking to her through the week. Now, this morning when I came into work, I did have a positive message from Wilma, and we spoke to her earlier on the phone, and we have a clip of that where she talks about a friend who has given her some information on her sister.
Mrs. Sinaida going fine for my sister, and they found on the Rich Tower there is some survivor. So they asked the survivor if they know Wendy Alindogan, which name of my sister, if they survive. Actually, the survivor tells my sister survives.
Now, Wilma hasn't actually been able to speak to her sister herself, and all those messages are going throughout social networks. So if you go to Instagram and put in the hashtag missing, you've got lots of people from the Philippines around the world putting up messages and pictures of their family looking for them.
Excellent. Samantha, Amber, thank you very much. Just a few of the stories there, John. We've been getting so many.
Okay, Lucas, thanks ever so much for that. And stay with us because we'll be back in a few minutes' time. You can also get in touch with me on Twitter at BBC John Soper. We're also going to be speaking to UNICEF about the aid deliveries to the Philippines.